Lewis Hamilton has signed with Mercedes for the 2026 season. Stay until the end to find out all the details of his return. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. Lewis Hamilton signing with Mercedes in the year 227 sent shockwaves through the Formula One universe, not merely because of the astonishing timing, but because it reopened a chapter many believed had been closed forever. It wasn't just a return, it was a resurrection, the revival of an alliance that had once rewritten history, torn apart by time, pride, and silent wars that played out behind mirrored glass and closed boardroom doors. The official announcement didn't come with confetti, camera crews, or dramatic piano music in a slickly edited video. It didn't trend on social media first. In fact, the world only learned of it because someone close enough to risk everything, leaked a conversation. A conversation that was never meant to see the light of day, one buried deep in the encrypted channels of Brackley's darkest corners. That voice, unmistakable, full of that slow, deliberate cadence, was Lewis Hamilton. It started long before that. Before Zurich. Before Brackley. Before the storm. The air had been shifting for months. The paddock, usually loud and restless, had gone still whenever Hamilton's name was brought up in connection with Mercedes. Journalists had stopped asking. Insiders stopped speculating. Because everyone knew what had happened. Everyone knew about the final days. The heated arguments. The missed calls. The text that never came. When Hamilton had walked away from Mercedes, it wasn't with a smile. It was with silence so loud that it echoed through every decision the team made after his departure. It shaped their culture, their losses, their recalibrated ambitions. They didn't just lose a driver, they lost the driver. The symbol, the blueprint, the beating heart. But time has a strange way of blurring pain into wisdom. And wisdom, if nurtured correctly, always leads back to truth. In late November, Zurich was cold, unforgiving, cloaked in a storm that made even the bravest pause. And yet, under the veil of rain, Toto Wolff emerged from a discreet meeting room tucked inside an anonymous building with tinted windows and no signage. A man of precision, routine, and logic, Toto had become a master of saying much while revealing nothing. But that night, there was no press officer by his side. No PR-approved script. Just him, his coat soaked through, and a look on his face that said something irreversible just happened. Inside that room, Hamilton had waited. Not as a driver begging for a seat, nor as a legend demanding respect. He had come as a man who had lived 1,000 lives since he last wore silver. Eyes sharper, voice quieter, soul heavier. They didn't shake hands. They didn't need to. Their history sat in the air like a third presence, listening, judging, remembering. What Hamilton said first was later paraphrased 1,000 ways by those who heard the leaked audio. But the essence never changed. Is the house still mine, or did you sell it to the future? And in that one question, everything was laid bare. The legacy, the pain, the hope. Toto didn't answer immediately. He looked down, hands clasped, perhaps hearing the echoes of past arguments, podium celebrations, shattered trophies, headlines that read too much into silence. When he finally spoke, it wasn't as a team principal. It was as a man who had aged in ways statistics couldn't measure. You were never just a tenant here, Lewis. You are the foundation. That single line became the most quoted phrase in F1 history within 72 hours of the leak. Fan art exploded online. T-shirts, NFTs, street murals, even tattoos. The internet was lit on fire not by a confirmation, but by a confession. And from there, the story snowballed. Former engineers began whispering about the strange calendar gaps on Wolff's schedule. Logistics staff reported unused travel budgets in locations where Toto was never supposed to be. Drivers who had been in talks with Mercedes suddenly went quiet. Agents grew cold. Something massive was shifting under the surface, and like tectonic plates realigning after centuries of pressure, it wasn't going to be subtle when it finally cracked open. The world hadn't seen Lewis in a cockpit in years. He had vanished from the track, retreating into a quieter existence. Art galleries in Tokyo, humanitarian work in Nairobi, lectures in Zurich. He was no longer just a racer. He had become a movement. A philosopher. A symbol. But behind all the evolution, the hunger had never died. It had simply matured. It had grown sharper. And when it finally returned, it didn't ask for permission. It demanded a throne. Inside the Mercedes garage, Preparations began without confirmation. New suits were stitched. A car was reconfigured. Data logs adjusted for a driving style that hadn't been on their screens in over a decade. Engineers were sworn to secrecy. Even the telemetry team was segmented. No one knew the full picture. And still, the rumors bled out like ink in water. Because no one can fully silence legacy when it starts to whisper again. And when Lewis walked into Brackley again, not escorted, not introduced, just walked in, the factory didn't erupt in applause. It went completely silent. People stopped mid-walk, mid-sentence, mid-email. And there he stood, in the same corridor where once they had celebrated the impossible. And without a word, the world knew. This wasn't a comeback. It was a reclaiming. The kind that doesn't come with fanfare or hashtags. The kind that storms in through the side door, finds its old seat, and simply says, "I'm not done." Hamilton didn't need a contract announcement. He didn't post a teaser. He didn't even update his bio. But everyone knew. Because some forces are too big to announce. They're felt, not heard. They're understood, not explained. And Lewis Hamilton returning to Mercedes wasn't news. It was prophecy fulfilled. From the deepest trenches of political power games in the paddock to the late-night war rooms of rival teams scrambling to rewrite strategies, the grid was flipped upside down. The betting markets collapsed. Media giants scrambled for exclusive interviews that would never come. And somewhere in a corner office in Maranello, someone dropped a glass of Barolo, because they knew he's back. And this time, he's not racing against them. He's racing against history itself. The year 227 didn't just mark a season. It marked a rebirth. Not just of a driver. Not just of a team. But of the myth. The legend of a man who was told to let go and instead chose to hold on tighter than ever. Lewis Hamilton signing with Mercedes in the year 227 sent shockwaves through the Formula One universe. And not just because of the timing. After years of speculation, false leaks, coded messages on social media, and a silence from both camps that felt almost strategic, the official confirmation came not through a press release or flashy video, but through a private conversation leaked from the depths of Brackley. It all began on a stormy Tuesday night in late November, when Toto Wolff was spotted leaving a clandestine meeting in Zurich. The Austrian executive had been unusually quiet in recent months, dodging questions with polished vagueness, always hinting at a long-term vision but never revealing the face of it. That Tuesday night, he had met not with an active driver or a hungry rookie, but with a 7-time world champion who had walked away from Mercedes years earlier under a cloud of tension and heartbreak, Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton. Sources close to the inner circle confirmed that the initial meeting was full of unfiltered emotion. Lewis, now more mature, grounded, and deeply philosophical in his approach to racing and life, looked Toto straight in the eye and asked, "Is the house still mine, or did you sell it to the future?" Toto, known for rarely letting emotions dictate his answers, took a long breath before replying, "You were never just a tenant here, Lewis. You are the foundation." That single sentence cracked open years of unresolved history. It was more than a reunion, it was the resurrection of a dynasty. But beneath the surface, this deal was unlike anything Formula One had ever seen. It wasn't just about bringing back a legend. It was about reshaping the very soul of a team that had lost its identity. Mercedes hadn't won a Constructors' Championship in over a decade. Their once invincible aura had dulled into mediocrity, marred by strategic missteps, internal disagreements, and an ever-shifting driver lineup that never quite clicked. In a sport where continuity often breeds dominance, Mercedes had become a ghost of its former self. But Lewis? He wasn't just coming back to race. He was coming back to rebuild. This wasn't a farewell tour or a nostalgic encore. This was war. Whispers emerged from the Brackley factory, engineers working overtime, high-level staff returning from sabbaticals, encrypted meetings being held at odd hours. Something seismic was shifting. Even rival teams felt it. Red Bull began reinforcing their technical team. Ferrari issued a sudden internal restructuring. Aston Martin cancelled all media appearances for a week. Everyone sensed it. The lion was coming back to the den. And it wasn't just the paddock that erupted. The fanbase, which had fractured after Lewis's exit, suddenly reawakened with a frenzy. Online forums crashed under the weight of speculation. TikTok exploded with frame-by-frame breakdowns of Toto's body language at the last FIA gala. Twitter was flooded with cryptic emojis from former Mercedes personnel, a single wolf, a silver star, the number 44 in binary code. Instagram accounts that had gone dark for years posted blurry images of the old 2020 steering wheel, sparking theories about its resurrection. The entire F1 world had gone from disbelief to obsession. But what truly sent shivers down the spine of every rival team principal wasn't the announcement, it was the voice recording that leaked 3 days later. An anonymous account posted a 17-second audio clip, allegedly recorded inside the Brackley war room. The clip, grainy and distorted, captured Lewis's unmistakable voice saying, "I'm not here to compete. I'm here to conquer. If they forgot what dominance feels like, I'll remind them." The reaction was instant. Headlines across the globe screamed about the return of the king. Sponsors that had distanced themselves from the team quietly re-engaged. Petronas requested a redesign of their 2026 livery, reportedly inspired by legacy and vengeance. Daimler's board approved a multi-million-dollar investment into next-gen simulator tech. Mercedes' stock surged. Rival team meetings were rescheduled. Every driver, from Verstappen to Behrman, was asked in interviews how they felt about Hamilton's return, and none of them could hide the slight twitch in their jawlines. Behind the scenes, Hamilton had laid out his terms. He wouldn't return as just a driver. He demanded technical influence. He asked for veto power on key hires. He wanted access to every layer of development, from wind tunnel tests to simulator calibration. He even brought his own team of performance psychologists, nutritionists, and AI analysts. He was building a fortress, and Mercedes agreed to every clause. Why? Because they didn't want him, they needed him. Insiders revealed that one of the more emotional moments in the negotiations came when Hamilton walked into the simulator room and saw his name still etched on a plaque beneath the seat he had last used. A technician told him, "We never took it off. We knew you'd be back." He didn't reply, just placed his hand on the seat, closed his eyes, and whispered, "Let's write the final chapter right." That chapter, however, would not be quiet. The season leading up to the announcement had been chaotic. George Russell had publicly questioned the team's direction. Rumors swirled about a potential move to Audi. And yet, when the news of Hamilton's return broke, Russell posted just one word on X: "Ready." Whether that was a declaration of confidence or a coded challenge remains unknown, but the dynamic between the two British drivers was instantly under the microscope. Commentators speculated endlessly. Would George accept a support role? Could he even coexist with Lewis's towering presence? Meanwhile, Hamilton's return wasn't universally praised. Some pundits argued it was a desperation move by both parties. Others questioned his age, his hunger, and whether he could still fight wheel-to-wheel with a grid full of rising phenoms. But Hamilton ignored the noise. He always had. His focus was singular. He wasn't coming back for nostalgia. He wasn't here for applause. He was here to silence every doubt with lap times, with telemetry, with victories. In private, Hamilton told his closest circle, "I'm not chasing the past. I'm creating the future. Legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you continue to build." Those words would soon be engraved at the entrance to Mercedes HQ, replacing the old team slogan. The unveiling of his new car was unlike anything before. The lights dimmed. A single spotlight hit the matte silver machine. No music. No fireworks. Just the growl of the engine echoing through the hangar, and then Hamilton walking out in silence. No helmet. Just him, staring down the press, the cameras, the world. And then, with a small smirk, he muttered two words picked up by a hot mic: "Remember me?" They would. Because this wasn't just a comeback. It was a declaration. The greatest was back. And Formula One would never be the same again. From the moment the words were spoken, from the instant Lewis Hamilton and Toto Wolff locked eyes and dropped the corporate pretense for something raw, something almost sacred, the world beneath their feet seemed to tilt. The air grew denser, filled with the weight of history and the silent electricity of possibility. What began as a routine discussion behind closed doors, in a room adorned with vintage racing art and echoes of dominance, quickly transformed into something more: an unraveling of past wounds, a subtle confrontation with legacy, and an awakening of dreams too stubborn to die quietly. The hours bled into each other, unnoticeably, like a long-forgotten engine revving back to life after years of stillness. The conversation drifted beyond tire compounds and strategy boards. They spoke of redemption, of unfinished business that gnawed at the edges of greatness. They spoke of the pain of departure, the frost that settled after Hamilton's exit, and the hollowness left in both the garage and the heart. Lewis, never one to romanticize for show, confessed that a part of him had never truly left. That despite the red Ferrari suit, despite the ocean of press conferences and new ventures, he would sometimes wake up hearing the roar of a Mercedes power unit echoing like a heartbeat that refused to fade. He admitted that every time he saw a silver arrow slice through the air on Sundays, something tightened in his chest, not out of jealousy, but of recognition. Like a ghost of a former self tugging at the edge of consciousness, reminding him who he once was, and who he still might be. Toto, ever the master of calculated risks, leaned back slowly, smiled not with his mouth but with the weary eyes of a man who had built dynasties from dust, and dropped a revelation so quietly that it almost got lost in the hum of ambient silence. He'd never closed the door. Buried within long-term contracts, written into development cycles and technical protocols, lay a contingency, a clause that allowed, just maybe, for a return. For a resurrection. The days that followed moved with a different rhythm. Meetings became less about projections and more about potential. Engineers whispered in corners. Data analysts stayed past midnight. The air in Brackley was no longer stale with stagnation, it vibrated with anticipation. Mercedes had evolved. This wasn't the same outfit Hamilton had once led to championship glory. The team had become something else, a fusion of bleeding-edge quantum engineering, legacy intuition, and an almost philosophical approach to car dynamics. The W227 wasn't just a car, it was a living organism of algorithms and carbon fiber, a creature whose behavior changed depending on who touched it. And now the question loomed, almost too big to voice aloud. Could Lewis still command it? The answer didn't come in words, but in action. Always in action. Hamilton didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for preferential treatment, didn't call in PR, didn't make it a spectacle. He asked for one thing: time. 5 laps, he said, with the same steel that once sent shivers down championship rival spines. 5 laps. If I don't feel the heartbeat of the car by then, I walk away. Forever. There was silence after he said it. Not disbelief, reverence. The simulator session wasn't public. It wasn't meant to be history-making. And yet, what happened inside that room sent shockwaves through every layer of Mercedes' structure. The simulator, now a marvel of neuroresponsive feedback and full-spectrum sensory immersion, was designed to blur the lines between man and machine, to replicate not just physics but emotion. No one expected what Hamilton did next. He didn't just drive. He translated. His inputs became poetry. His reactions were milliseconds faster than the AI-predicted optimal lines. He wasn't wrestling the W227, he was dancing with it, guiding it not as a pilot but as a partner. By the end of lap 3, telemetry showed anomalies. But not the kind that indicated malfunction, the kind that suggested evolution. Variables that had never existed before suddenly appeared in the data streams. The car was behaving in ways no one had modeled. On lap 5, the simulator team watched in stunned silence as the system's predictive AI shut itself down. Not out of error, but out of irrelevance. It couldn't keep up. It wasn't needed. Hamilton had outpaced the machine that was built to guide him. When the run ended, there was a moment of stillness, and then chaos. Elodie Tanaka, the lead engineer whose reputation had been forged in the fires of innovation, burst into the central command hub, face lit with something bordering on disbelief and awe. Her voice cut through the technical chatter like thunder. He changed the language of the car. It sings differently now. It didn't matter that no one understood what she meant, not fully. The phrase became gospel overnight. It was scrawled across whiteboards, engraved on new team merch, whispered like a mantra in late-night design meetings. Because everyone who touched the data, who heard the subtle shift in the engine's tone, who watched the footage of Hamilton's hands on the wheel, they felt it too. Something had changed. Something fundamental. The car wasn't just reacting, it was responding. From that point on, everything accelerated. Mercedes didn't just plan for a comeback. They orchestrated a return of mythic proportions. Meetings became rituals. Every sensor was recalibrated. Every wind tunnel session was infused with a new kind of urgency, not panic, but purpose. Hamilton wasn't simply returning. He was reawakening a machine that had been waiting for him, dormant like Excalibur in the stone, waiting for the only one who could pull it free. Whispers spread across the paddock. Rivals tried to dismiss it, but their engineers were already studying the new telemetry patterns. Fans clung to every leak, every rumor, dissecting grainy footage of Hamilton stepping out of the Brackley compound as if it were the Zapruder film. Journalists speculated, sponsors circled like hawks, and social media erupted in theories ranging from plausible to prophetic. But the truth? The truth was simpler, and infinitely more powerful. Lewis Hamilton wasn't back because of nostalgia. He wasn't back because of ego. He was back because something inside him still burned, a spark that no championship could extinguish, no critics could smother. He was back because when he touched that car, it spoke to him. And when he answered, it sang. And the world, whether it was ready or not, would soon hear the song. Toto hadn't called Lewis in months. There had been rumors, meetings behind soundproof doors, speculative whispers from insiders who spoke in careful fragments. But then came that simulation, a private session using Mercedes' new quantum logic AI sim environment, built to map not just reflexes, but the very intent of a driver's consciousness. Lewis had stepped in, supposedly just for an evaluation. No cameras, no journalists, just a pure test of compatibility with what Mercedes had become since his departure. What happened in that room wasn't leaked, wasn't recorded, but the engineers left pale, silent, some even tearful. The machine had never responded like that. Not with rights. Not with anyone. The simulation was supposed to be a stress test for the W227 Eclipse. Instead, it became a revelation. When Toto finally made the call, there was no preamble. No catch-up, no nostalgia. Just 4 words, cutting through the distance like a scalpel through fog: it's time to fly. Hamilton didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The silence that followed was heavier than any affirmation. But the comeback was never going to be simple, because Gustav Reitz wasn't a placeholder. He was a storm in a human shell. A product of a new era, faster than logic, obsessed with precision, a man who read race telemetry the way poets read heartbreak. Born in Berlin, raised inside simulations, Gustav didn't drink, didn't smile, didn't fail. He was the future Mercedes had built when they stopped waiting for heroes. And now, the legend returned. Not to mentor. Not to retire in grace. But to compete. The first joint meeting was a crucible. Gustav, arms crossed, eyes unreadable behind cold blue irises, didn't look at Hamilton when he asked, "Do you still brake with your heart, or have you learned to trust numbers?" Lewis didn't flinch. "I brake with the truth," he said, letting the words hang like smoke. "Sometimes the numbers lie." That was it. The line that split the paddock in two. Within hours, social media erupted. Hashtag Hamilton Returns trended globally, but so did hashtag Reitz Era. The press, the fans, even the mechanics, everyone picked sides. Mercedes had unintentionally created a civil war within its own temple. 2 philosophies. 2 legends. 1 seat that mattered. At the winter test in Lusail, people flew from 5 continents just to glimpse it. Not a race. Not a championship. Just a test. But they came in silence, cameras up, breath held. When Hamilton walked into the pit, wearing the new-gen suit with thermal-reactive silver threads and the glowing star at his back, it wasn't applause that greeted him. It was reverence. Oh, the kind reserved for something holy returning from exile. The W227 Eclipse didn't growl. It whispered. Engine noise had been partially phased out in favor of optimized aeroacoustic silence. What mattered was the way it moved, like thought turned into motion. Lap 1, conservative. Lap 2, tighter. Lap 3, impossible. Hamilton carved a line through Sector 2's double apex that wasn't in any of the data packs. Not even the AI sim predicted it. Engineers scrambled, reran the logs. It wasn't a fluke. He'd found a line the car didn't know it had. Toto stared at the screens, face unreadable, then whispered to no one, "He's rewriting the map." And just like that, the mythology reignited. Pundits speculated wildly. Was this a swan song? A genius making one last stand? Or was this something more, a man returning not to prove, but to become? Podcasts exploded. Sponsors hovered like hawks. The FIA issued a rare statement acknowledging a seismic moment in Formula One's cultural and technological evolution. But inside Brackley, it was quieter. Inside, it was about precision. It was about the moment Lewis stepped into the room with Toto Gustav Elodie, the team's new lead engineer, and Peter Bonington, brought back in a semi-retired ghost-in-the-machine advisory role. There was no champagne, no ceremony, just a contract, printed on graphene composite, encoded with biometric identifiers. It wasn't just about racing. The document included legacy clauses. Hamilton was now part of the team's philosophical board, an unheard-of role in motorsport. He would mentor drivers not just in grip and braking, but in ethics, in meaning, in the integration of AI as ally, not replacement. He would shape the team's soul. When he signed, Toto didn't congratulate him. He looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You're not coming back as a driver. You're coming back as a lighthouse." Lewis placed his palm on the monocoque of the Eclipse and murmured, almost inaudibly, "Let's find the edge again." What followed was chaos wrapped in poetry. Rumors leaked that Ferrari had sent an offer so large it was classified as a state-level deal. Lewis turned it down in 2 words: too late. In Bahrain, during the first practice session, Hamilton and Wrights took to the track together. The telemetry showed a dance of madness and mastery. Gustav pushed harder than ever, setting purple sectors. But Lewis did something else. He didn't fight the car. He danced with it. The line between human and machine blurred. And suddenly, it wasn't about times. It was about rhythm. Journalists cried watching live data streams. Children in the stands mimicked steering wheels, eyes wide. Mechanics held their breath during every lap. Mercedes didn't just field 2 drivers. It fielded a paradox, the future and the origin, colliding in a single garage. And when race day arrived, as the engines roared and lights prepared to drop, Lewis sat in the cockpit, eyes closed. Not to visualize, not to focus, but to feel. To listen to the old music again. Through the neural interface, a single phrase pulsed into the system, recorded but never aired. One more time. Not for the record. For the soul.